music you're hearing is a familiar song, Precious Lord, Take My Hand by Mahalia Jackson. And I put that in there for a particular reason, because when we start talking about God and what help we need from God, it kind of was a reminder of some of the ways that we think about the relationship we have with the Lord. I want to start out with just a reminder of what we stated our purposes were for this program. We wanted to talk about the story of creation from an evolutionary presentation perspective and how it can become our spiritual creation story. We talk about the science of the brain and the connections between the brain's functions and our religious and spiritual life. We wanted to talk about the intertwined evolution of culture and religion from the beginning until now, and in particular how that relationship has changed over the millennia. And finally, we want to talk about the paradigm shift in our cosmology as it occurs in religion over the centuries, and what that has meant and continues to mean for our understanding of God. What we're going to do is each of the three of us that have been the presenters, Ernie Stokely and Ben Marshall and I and me, we want to talk about the key points that we've each made during our presentations. And Ernie started this off with his discussion of origins. And so I'd like for just Ernie to go over to the key points that he made in his origins presentations. This is all background for you. And let's don't take any questions during the points, but we could always come back to these slides if you got questions when we finish this brief overview. Ernie?
We talked about the fact that we're part of an ongoing evolutionary process, that evolution did not occur at some point in the past, but we're part of it today. The other thing that I thought of when I thought of the summary of that part of our program was that the scale of the cosmos is unimaginably large. It is beyond our comprehension. It's simply beyond the human comprehension to understand distances like from here to the moon is roughly 230,000 miles. It takes a couple of seconds for light or a radio signal to come from the moon to us. If we go to the sun, we're talking about 100 million miles, around 8 minutes for a photon of light to get from the sun to Earth. It's roughly the same from the Earth to Mars. And then if we go further out in scale, we're talking about millions of light years across our Milky Way galaxy, and even bigger if we go out to the superclusters that we talked about. We're talking about scales of billions of light years. So that kind of scale is just simply beyond our ability as human beings to understand. The same thing with time scales. We talked about the time scales involved with the evolution of the solar system. We went back 13.8 billion years when we first started, when the universe was first created, and we talked about that Big Bang creation. Our Earth started around 4.6 billion years ago. Dinosaurs disappeared just recently, 60 to 70 million years ago. Our species has only been around for around 100,000 years, just a very, very short time. And we talked about that well, I don't think we mentioned this during the program, but someone has scaled the universe on a scale of 24 hours. And if we do that, we will find that the length of time that our species, human beings, Homo sapiens, the length of time that we've been on the earth is less than 1 second before midnight. So that gives you some sense of how recent we are and what a recent species we are. And as I said before, just as the science's understanding of the past continues to evolve, so does our story of the creation and all that is, so does that story continue to evolve. We noted that our bodies are composed of stardust, that we're composed of the very same material that came into existence when the Big Bang inflation occurred almost 14 billion years ago. And finally, I think I tried to present the notion that our understanding of the new creation story invites us into a new context for seeing ourselves as an integral creature on the planet, and invites us to new sense of living responsibly on behalf of other human beings and other creatures and other forms of life on Earth.
Thanks, Ernie. I covered the second module, which was on human evolution. And the points that I emphasized there were we Homo sapiens, or humans, evolved on Earth in Africa from lower life forms over millions of years ago. And we began populating the large Eurasian landmass between 50 and 70,000 years ago. As Ernie said, human evolution did not halt in the distant past, but it continues today. It especially continues in the human brain, which reflects, to this point in time and to our best knowledge, the penultimate of the universe's emergent creativity and complexity on a scale compared to the complexity of the universe itself. Both cultural environment, including climate change, and genetics, that is our inheritance, shape human traits and social behaviors. And in modern societies, that cultural environmental change occurs faster than genetic changes. Thus, that cultural change tends to drive evolutionary adaptations. I made the point that we make of God what our brains allow us to make of God. Each of our brains is wired a little differently as a result of our varied life experiences and genetic inheritance. And the point there being that we will all view God at least a little differently because our brains are wired differently because of our past experiences and our inheritance. We talked about myths when we talked about human evolution. Myths are the stories of our search through the ages for truth, for meaning, and for significance. And while a biblical scripture, a story or myth, may not be literal historical fact, it may contain great wisdom and guidance about how we ought to live. Religion and culture co-evolved from hunter-gatherer tribes to settled societies and on to modern states, with each impacting development of the other. Religions evolved as an effective way for egalitarian communities, and those hunter-gatherer societies were indeed egalitarian communities, for them to govern themselves, providing social cohesion for the tribe, while putting the good of society ahead of individual self-interest. And finally, we talked about religious rituals and how they help us to act out our myths, providing both a cognitive and an emotional understanding of the myth. Christian myths have changed little since the 4th century, and some need to be modified to support current cultures and modern interpretations. And Ben Marshall made that point again later in his discussions of spiritual evolution. And then Ben had the points of Module 3.
One of the things that I've sought to impress upon us is that all of our images of the sacred over the centuries have been conditioned and shaped by our view of the natural world and by the content of our culture. The essential nature of the sacred is and always will be a mystery to us, but it's critical for us to recognize the importance of how we do image and talk about that which we call God. Is God that being outside of creation that intervenes when needed and who allows us to do what we please with creation? Or, for instance, is God within all things in creation, and how we treat our world and each other is actually the way we are treating God? And those two possibilities are radically different in many ways for a lot of people. Secondly, our need for God has come from our drive to survive and to flourish in a creation where there is suffering and death and where we believe we must protect ourselves. We are creatures who not only have a deep genetic instinctive defense mechanism, but also one who became self-conscious, able to transcend ourselves, and became driven by the need for meaning in life, and who therefore seek to control and create that meaning in both positive and negative ways. Relationship with what we conceived of as the sacred over the centuries was an essential way that humans have sought to find that meaning, but always in concert with the culture. This is not up there, but it's interesting to me that somehow humans have always looked beyond themselves, beyond the natural world to gain what they needed to survive with meaning. Was that a creation of their own, or was it in a response to a built-in sensitivity to the ultimate reality, to the sacred that's always been present? That's something for us to ponder. Since the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, religion has slowly been transformed again, just as it's been transformed throughout human history as humans have evolved in their understanding of the universe and the culture surrounding them. Prior to the Enlightenment, religion and culture were interwoven. Since then, the two have become separated. We have now entered a very intense period of struggle with that transformation because our communication ability is so great that change is dramatically speeded up. The wonders of science have opened for us a new way of seeing our universe, and it's challenging the ways that we have always conceived of God and how God functions. And many of us are finding that challenge difficult. So the question for us is, what is our part in this transformation that must take place if our future on this planet is to be all that we need it to be, and so that we'll be able to find the meaning in life that we humans will seek? Many of us have made major strides in that transformation already, but the church as an institution has a way to go. There's many, many things having to do with our way we do worship, the way we speak about God, the way we pray, that we have to consider in the light of, if we focus on this evolutionary process, what does that mean for all of that? It's important to realize that there have been many voices over the centuries, even the millennia, that have spoken of the way to the future. It's just that we have not listened to it. It's time to let those words from the past be heard and to go further to speak the new words for this new day. The future of our planet and the quality of our life together depends upon it.
Thanks, Ben. You may recall that last week we handed out a list of possible questions mainly to stimulate your thinking, because I know that probably most of you were not bringing that list back into class today. I thought I would put them up here again. That was the first page of the list. Had them organized into questions that involve our understanding of the past, and then some questions with regard to our current perceptions and what the questions are that we're asking today. And finally, on the last page there, some questions about future, what our needs are for changing church rituals, for example, the cultural change that's going on around the world so rapidly today, what that might mean. And then, again, as Ernie talked about, does this understanding of how the creation developed over the past billions of years impact our understanding of our spirituality and our responsibility for maintenance and taking care of the earth? So we can go back to any of these questions that you want to ask, and certainly ask whatever questions that you would like to ask. So we'd like to go now into a group discussion, and while Ben and Ernie and I may take a lead on answering some of the questions, we want certainly to have all of you feel not only the responsibility to ask the questions, but also to provide your views of the answers. So with that, we're open to comments, questions, concerns.
If we're allowed to go out of order, I've always thought, as far as what changes in our United Methodist Church rituals, I think we need to revise the worship service. I don't think the way that people have done it in an attempt to do it more modern or for my age group, I don't think that's working either. I don't really know what would work. I guess we could take a big poll, but I just feel like worship is not speaking to enough of us. I don't know if I think we're in different generations. I am from most of you in here, so it might speak to you, but it doesn't really speak to me. And I haven't found a worship service in like a more informal church that speaks to me either. So I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like worship needs to be revised a little.
Good comment. Any responses to that? Any of you in here have been on the worship commission of North Haven? Has this been discussed there? I'm sure it has.
I think it's probably discussed in every church quite a bit.
I would love to know what you think you'd like to have.
Well, I can say for me personally, I don't, again, we'd have to take a poll because I'm an individual. For me personally, maybe something not rock music, not something trying to emulate rock music at all, but maybe like some African movement. Not actual African movement, but just a little more movement, a little more freedom. Again, I don't know how this would look, but I feel like just sitting in a chair, maybe it's me, but I don't feel comfortable sitting in a chair for an hour, just not moving. I also have a 3-year-old that won't stay in a Sunday school class either. And so to have to try to keep her quiet in there is impossible. And it makes it undoable for me. I can't take her, and so therefore I can't go. When she was a baby, it was cute, but now it's just annoying as a 3-year-old. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's what comes to mind. Movement. I love the old hymns. I love those, but maybe somehow, I don't know. I don't think trying to make them spunkier is going to work. I don't know what will work. Does anybody else have a thought? Am I alone in this? Does anybody else? Do you guys
Jan
feel?
looks like she has a thought she wants to share with us.
I'm sorry that you're speaking directly to Jerry Bywaters Cochran, who led a movement choir here at North Haven in dance and sacred movement. And in fact, one of my most memorable memories of worship was when she was a young woman and did a dance of bringing the scriptures to the congregation. And the dramatic movement was holding up that big Bible and letting it crash down on the table.
Bet that was powerful. That's great.
And then she picked it up and brought it to us. In other words, that it came. So that symbol, and North Haven has a thread there of a history, and so resurrecting it, so to speak, and experimenting, because at the time that was considered experimental.
I think you're addressing a dilemma that all churches have, as you mentioned, and appealing to and being attractive to and drawing in members of your generation, younger people. One of the problems we've got, and one of the things that concerns me, I've talked to my kids about this who don't attend church regularly. And I've also talked to them about sending them copies of the kinds of things we've done in our science and religion programs. And their responses have been interesting. And it is, Papa, if it's longer than 4 or 5 minutes, we don't look at it. So there's an attention span that is, I think, generational, that an hour-long church service that moves at the pace that we're used to moving at doesn't fit in with that mindset. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's a problem, and you pointed out very clearly. Charles, you have a point?
I was thinking back, my mother-in-law passed away last year, and I was thinking back before she went into a nursing home that we had a few brief religious discussions. And in her generation, when she talked about religion, she talked about the miracles of the Bible. That was the basis of her whole religious thought, was, the virgin birth and walking on water and water into wine and all those kinds of things. My own experience has been much more looking at symbolism and the what those stories require of us and expect of us as individuals. My daughter, who grew up in the United Methodist Church, follows the Lakota Sioux religion, and it's strictly into mysticism and some ritual, though, but a totally different ritual from what we would experience. And dance is a very important part of it. And I think maybe the only way to approach this is to stop having a 500-seat place for everybody to be at the same time, and maybe open up spaces all over the church for different kinds of just like we do with our different Sunday school classes, only more as worship rather than learning.
That's a good idea.
Other comments, Ben?
I think there's another aspect to it besides just physical. I think if we take seriously what we're talking about here in terms of how we see God, there's movement involved, inward movement, not just outside movement, not just physical movement, but inward movement. And I think where I feel our worship services lacks in so many cases is there's no inward movement. We don't help people to move emotionally in worship. And that's why I think the more contemplative or mystical kind of perspective, it would be helpful for us, would be important for us in the future. As I said the other day, that fits with this this understanding of God within us and God within creation. And I think so. It's not just a matter, folks, of some outward kind of change of what we do, but how we see this. And that's going to take a long time for us to move through that, but we have to begin somewhere. And so we each have to begin to respond in what we feel about this and how we see this ourselves and how we see God. And it's going to take a lot of education and a lot of help for people to reimagine God. As I said, God's not out there anymore in this view. God's in here, and God's in you. And what does that mean, you see?
One of the things that I reflect on and have been more and more during this series is this emotional communication of what our religion means to us. One of the reasons I played this Precious Lord song of Mahalia Jackson, even though that view of God may not fit our contemporary view, my contemporary view of what God is in my understanding, it has a very strong emotional tie that I grew up singing those songs. Those traditional songs reach me emotionally, even though the words may not be appropriate quite for a current understanding. But boy, the emotional appeal is very, very strong. And that's part of the reason it's hard to give that up, because I know what it means to me. I see several of you nodding. You must feel the same thing I'm talking about here.
The comment I had, and I certainly understand the critique that the young lady mentioned, but and I've only been a member of this church a little over 5 years, so I haven't had the history, but I have never been to a church that reaches many different people in many different ways as well as this one does. And I understand that I have a daughter who's a young mother, and my goodness, I understand that you're limited on when you can go. But if you look at the totality of what we do with our Faith Voices on Justice series and our Second Community series, both of those are very impactful. They're not formal religious services, so to speak. However, they're part of the experience you can have here at North Haven. And I understand it's difficult for a young mother to be able to attend some of those things. But my goodness, and they're very beneficial, I think, for the group at large to understand the bigger pictures. I don't want to say one's more important than the other. They're meeting different needs. But I think what the Second Community did this last year or two has been remarkable, with making members of our own church and drawing people from outside to understand the differences and the similarities among many different religions, not just sects within Christianity, but within world religions. And then the other thing is, of course, I'm one of those people that kind of likes to be here, like many of you also, nearly every Sunday. There's a variety of things that we do, and I think if you see the music ministry, there's sometimes we sing African program songs, and we often sing in Spanish, and so that's just the beginning of intercultural connections. But I think if you look at what the entire picture is, I think this is a remarkably forward-looking and resilient church. Of course, and we certainly appreciate that. But I certainly understand what you're saying, yes.
I think I've been a member of North Haven since 1968, and the church has always been open to trying to reflect changes in worship and program and adult education that will open people up to new experiences and new perspectives, new growth opportunities. So it's not saying we found the magic formula, because we certainly haven't, but we keep on looking, and that says a lot. I want to change the subject. Just go ahead, David.
I was just going to make another comment, maybe to tie the conversation we just had with what's on the screen right now. So, one of the aspects, very concretely, in worship for me that I, at least am thinking about, is the prayer time when we offer up our concerns for group prayer. So if our understanding of God is that God is working through us, but that God does not come in from outside and manipulate things and so forth, it just raises for me the question, what is the role of that in our worship service? Are we expecting God to do something with the prayers that we're offering? And I'm not saying he does. I'm just raising the question, because if I think Ben alluded to, is God, on the one hand, is God intervening, so to speak? That's my term. Or is God, basically God has no hands but our hands? So if those are two different perspectives, what is the role of that particular ritual that we have in our worship service against what we think about God? Is God simply moving through us, and we're supposed to be supporting each other emotionally and maybe practically if we hear a concern that is expressed? Or are we expecting God to heal us? And maybe God can do that in subtle ways that we're not maybe considering. But that's just a specific example, but it gets back to, what is our understanding of God? Do we expect God to do things that maybe God is not in the business of doing? So
Let me repeat what I think I heard you say, and then I'd like to have others comment on. And what I heard you asking, a very, really good question about, when we have our prayers of the congregation, are we appealing in a traditional way to an external God to help us with our lives, to help us to avoid difficulties, to give us some help from whatever the travails we have in living our lives, that external view of God? Or, in perhaps a more modern interpretation, are we appealing and trying to strike a chord with an emotional part of ourselves, of a God and a spirit within us, to raise that sensitivity to those concerns that we think we want to be sharing with others, and we want others to share with us? So we can see that prayer, I think, in the raising of our own emotional awareness, and that's the way I try to do it, try to use that and to understand that. But it's a very different view than appealing, as the hunter-gatherer societies did, and we have done for millennia since then, to appeal to an external, controlling, omnipotent, omniscient God who has control over everything. And those are two very different views. Are there other thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah. A God of mystery. We're dealing with symbolism. We're dealing with rituals. We're dealing with metaphor. So I think with these church services, educational material should be provided so that the participants can better understand the mysteries, the rituals, et cetera, et cetera. Because only when you better understand the service will it have meaning in your life. If you don't understand everything that's going on, then it's not going to have any meaning in your life, so you leave it behind on Sunday, and it's not part of your life on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Brian, I would ask, can you do that with written materials we try to do that with songs, with emotional kind of communications, with media, with a lot of different ways to try to help people to understand what the message is. And my concern here is written materials in a church service, again, it's the attention span and the ability for a large number of people to get a message through written material in that kind of way, unless we took it as a follow-up homework assignment, and I don't have a whole lot of confidence that would work. So are there any other comments on Brian's point? Let me raise a question here that on a couple of points that Ben's made. On his second point, at the end of it, it says, the intertwining of our religion and culture has been an essential vehicle for that survival. And then the next point is, in the Enlightenment, the sacred became separated from the culture, and therefore religion has been going through a deep transformation, the result of which is not clear. You know, it seems to me I've reflected on this since I saw what Ben had written here and I prepared these slides. And my thinking is that one of the reasons that separation has occurred is because when religion is intertwined with culture, it becomes almost too much of a force that could be used for evil as well as for good. You think of the Crusades, you think of the 30 Years' War, you think of what's going on in Middle Eastern countries right now where the religion and the culture are not separated, and the kind of damage that can cause. I think it was the founding fathers here that separated religion from government. So the separation, I think, is a political separation that we're talking about. I don't see that religion is so much separated from the culture as it is an attempt to separate it from too much political influence of religion, which can be very, very damaging. Any thoughts on that? Ben?
I think
The issue is that religion has to stand over against culture, is the problem. When culture and religion have been intertwined, then religion takes on the process of culture, so to speak, or the character of culture. And the problem with that is that culture goes off and seeks to provide meaning in ways that are not helpful. And so what religion has to do is stand over against culture and critique culture in a prophetic kind of way so that we don't fall into the trap of going the directions that we don't need to go. If religion has anything to it, it has this understanding of built in that that love is important, that caring for others is important. Now, religion can get sidetracked by the culture and gone off into terrible ways, as it has been. But that's not the core of what we're talking about. All religion have the core of love and concern for those who need help, et cetera, et cetera. And so where culture goes off and doesn't carry that, religion has to stand against it. So it's good that it's separated. It's been involved with each other because of various kinds of factors. What's caused the separation now is, I think, it's important that it's separated, but the issue has been that the church has not changed either. The church didn't change in the Enlightenment with its view of God to go with the understanding of the universe, and that's what we're talking about now. And so the church has been behind in helping people to see this different way of looking at the world so that things could be different in so many ways. But the separation still, I think, is important. I don't know whether that made sense in saying that.
Very good. That's very helpful. Any other comments on this point? Brian?
one point, well, Ben's point brings to mind a great classic book, Christ Transforming Culture by H. Richard Niebuhr. Christ and Culture, thank you. And my understanding of that book is that God reveals his social wisdom, and that social wisdom should guide us and guide our culture. So as far as change for the better in culture, it should come from God's revealed social wisdom. You've got some thoughts.
Other questions or comments? Okay.
It seems to me that we all have those times when we want some confidential counseling. We might not find it through a human, through a minister or a psychologist, but we'd rather find that thing through God. We could go share our concerns and our questions and our thoughts with a tree out there, but that tree is not that supernatural thing that we feel that we're going to need. And we can go share those things with God. And where does the church come in? Well, the church is keeping God alive for us. And if there's no other function for the church than that, I think that's plenty.
You know, that's a great setup for the question that's on this slide. That Ben added it since our list last week. It's down here, third from the bottom. What do you need from God? And I think that's a very key question that we all need to ask ourselves. What do each of us need from God? And I suspect it's something very different in many of our cases because we have different life experiences, different current life situations, different stresses in our lives. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on what do you need from God, Charles?
Well, having spent my almost entire life in the Dallas area, I need God for hope. You know, I see so much that's wrong with our society and so much that needs to be changed, and individuals seem to have very little impact on that. Some individuals obviously have a huge impact compared to others, but I need God to be the symbol of our collective will that things get better.
Okay. Another response to that question.
Mine's kind of along the lines of this gentleman here. I think I need God, I guess, just to love me, to want me as a creature, and to understand and to connect with emotionally.
Others? While you're thinking about it, just let me read you the words to that song that I played earlier. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. That's a very personal kind of a relationship with God, but I think it says what you were saying. And in a sense, I think we all feel that at some times in our lives. We feel a need for God to help us in those kind of ways. All right. Other questions? Bob?
The concept of a need for God, at least for me, is I sort of look at it. God is, from what Paul Tillich said, is God is the ground of our being, and I think that what I struggle for is alignment with that ground of being, and so what I would like is for God's message to me to be a little clearer in terms of what I should be about. But the concept of being in alignment with whatever God is I guess I just need to get some confirmation from God in some way
that what I'm thinking and doing is in alignment with what God is.
I think one of the questions for me out of the general theme of evolution is God leading us somewhere, or are we simply evolving? You know, is there a direction in which the evolution is intended to go, or is it simply unfolding and it could be going in a different direction? And is God involved in leading us in that particular direction? It's just those
One
are
of the
thoughts I
comments
have.
we made during our presentations this past 12 weeks was that natural selection does not have a purpose that we can detect, but the evolution of the universe has been an increasing level of creativity, an emergent creativity and complexity. Now, is God leading that? Is there a meaning to that increasing level of complexity and creativity? I think that's a theological question in itself, I think, and it's a, I think scientists and theologians all agree that it's happening. Now, why it's happening is the next question. Ernie?
I think there's a little bit of Calvinism in that question, for me at least, because I think if you take that too far, it takes you off the hook for responsibility for evolution. And one of my, I guess everybody's gotten that from me, and that is that I think the message coming out of this story for me is we have a lot of responsibility as the top predator, as far as we know, the most intelligent creature on the planet, to start taking responsibility for the way the planet's going. And we've gotten our population so big now that we have more. It will take a 10 million years for us to recover the species that have been lost in the last 100 years. So I think that the proposition that there may be a supernatural force guiding evolution is a little dangerous for me.
Okay, Ben?
Yeah, let me add to what Ernie's saying, because I certainly agree with what he's saying. I have conceived that the God who is the ground of being and who is the force behind evolution, what it's about is becoming all that we're created to be, that we're moving, but that creation means that life is life, and life means that all things are important, and that it means building up, not tearing down. And so that is the movement for me in terms of what God is about. God is about anything. And so what that means is that we have to be about building up and not tearing down, and being a part of this process of creation, so that things are all that they need to be, all that were created to be. That to me is love. What it means to love is to build up. And so that's what God's about.
It's interesting that in going through these points that we made, the word survival appeared so many different times. And in another sense, you can look at that building up and that love and that caring for others and having them care for us is a foundational to the survival that we've talked about. So those two understandings, I think, go hand in hand. Are there other thoughts and comments on this particular topic or any other question?
Or supernatural being in the natural process of evolution. And one thing the study of evolution tells me is the problem of theodicy, or why do good things happen or bad things happen to good people, I think is cleared up and goes away. I mean, that's been a big obstacle for a lot of people to belief in God. Well, theodicy is bad things happen because of the free will of human beings, but also when it's a natural disaster, that's due to a natural process. So I think the study of evolution, the science of evolution, strengthens one's belief in God, because science is never going to be able to explain the Big Bang and what caused the Big Bang. So there's a lot of mystery there, and why can't God be the answer to that mystery?
Let me go on and let me extend Brian's comment there, because one of the questions I want to ask has this 13-week program had any significant impact upon your thinking, upon your religious beliefs, upon your spirituality, upon your commitments? Or are we preaching to the choir where you say, we spent 13 weeks talking about things that I already knew and I already understood? So the three of us have asked this question several times. Are we preaching to the choir in here, or are we having some impact in significant or small ways on how people understand the nature of God and understand the nature of themselves? I'm not looking for compliments here. I'm looking for critiques. James.
What I would say to that is that I appreciate the reminder of some of the things that we've known in the past. And what Ben and Bob and others have talked about, this God within us, I think that's one of my needs for God right there. And the series has reminded me of many of those things. But specifically, when I pray, I'm actually talking to God that is within me and reminding me of to be merciful, to be kind, to seek justice, and be humble in appropriate situations, all those kinds of things. And that's, so I think it's the reminder is very good. It was helpful to me.
Well, one of the comments that was in the introduction here was the fact that all of our brains are wired a little differently because of all of the experiences we have gone through, as well as the evolutionary process and our heredity. And I taught history for 30 years, and that concentrated on an even shorter period of time than the amount of time that humans have been here, because it deals mainly with the written word and forward from that. I'm kind of a science buff, and so what y'all have presented here has brought many ideas that I had not considered. They may not have been your personal creations. They may have been items that you came across in your studies as well, probably. But I think any time that we can hear those and share our own perceptions and with other people who have and in serious, I mean, let's face it, too much of our time is dealt with trivia, and the opportunity to think about the big questions and the big concepts of the universe is not something that we really have every day, all day long. So I think it's a very valuable exercise that we've gone through here for me anyway.
Thank you. David, I'd like to hear, David's been here every week, so I'd like to just get your thoughts on this.
I'd say amen to what Charles said, and also yes, I've gotten some ideas that have not that were new to me come out in this thing, and not only that, it's raised questions that make me want to go and do some more studying on my own and try to figure out kind of how this all fits together. It's been a fast thing. I hope you guys will do it again, and we'll really have enjoyed it.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, I'd say for me, I don't know a lot about science. I studied more the arts in college, so it's been enlightening for me in that way. Also enlightening to find so many people wanting to have, like Charles said, this serious discussion. I think part of what, and you guys have talked about this, I mean, the church is also about meeting together with a community of loving people, that's one of the benefit. And to see that other people are like me and have big questions and want to discuss it builds community and camaraderie between us, which is very valuable, I see. So it's been extremely valuable to me. As far as how you might use it to educate and enlighten others, the YouTube idea you have is great. I think offering to show the video, for classes and see if that gets any takers. Just the discussion aspect too. Again, I'm just going to harp on that. That's been really helpful. Thank you. Thank you all.
The point that I think this course has been strongest for me on is that I've really understood so much more about the Bible stories and what their real meaning is. I've gone to a lot of classes about studying the Bible, but to see the changes that have occurred on the beliefs in the Bible stories has really come through to me, and I also think that in the last several months I've seen many more stories either in the newspaper or in magazines talking about explanations for some of the things that we've talked about here, coming up with different ideas. So maybe things are evolving even faster than we thought.
One of the fallouts for this has been that almost every day in the newspaper, Dottie will point out to me 2 or 3 articles that relate to some of the topics we've talked about in here. So you really ought to read that, Tom. You really need to take a look at that. So, and I really want to tell you how much we appreciate you being here. You've been very faithful, and we've been very much enjoyed putting this together. We talked about it this past Wednesday when we met. We probably, the 3 of us, have probably learned more about this than any of you have, simply the time we've spent discussing it and talking about it among us. But anyway, thank you so much for being here.